Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of In the Prog Seat. Happy Tuesday, everybody. We're here once again to do a little album war. We're going to do a part two of a episode we did a few weeks back where we looked at four albums from four prominent bands after the big lineup change, right? So we're going to take another stab at an album war for today. We're going to move on to some other things over the next couple episodes, but this should be a fun one. Let me introduce the crew. We got Chad Hutchinson in the house. Ken Golden is here. Eric Porter is here. Our center square is George Lamy. We got the other big guy from Chicago, Mr. Louis Nasser, and also from New York, three New Yorkers here today, Chuck Alvarez. And we want to say hello to Chris Canzaneri and Anthony Farrar, who could not make it tonight. So let's talk about the albums, shall we? So
Mhm.
all of these albums again feature a new lineup of the band, and the kind of whole process here is that we're trying to pick which was the most successful with the new album, which ones do we like the most. So we got Camel, Rain Dances, right? Of course, the big change here is we got Gary Ferguson, right?
No,
Sorry,
that
I always say
oh,
Gary, Doug Ferguson. I
Doug
always want to
Ferguson.
say Gary. Doug Ferguson is replaced on bass by Richard Sinclair, and Mel Collins joins the band. We got UK Danger Money. Of course, Alan Holdsworth and Bill Bruford gone. Terry Bozzio comes in. No new guitar player added. We got Yes Drama. Rick Wakeman and John Anderson gone, replaced by the Buggles, Trevor Horn and Jeff Downs. And then and then we've got King Crimson, Larks, Tongues, and Aspic. Pretty much a brand new band for King Crimson. We've got In Comes John Wetton from Family and 10 million other things. Bill Bruford comes over from Yes. David Cross and Jamie Muir joined the band, replacing Mel Collins, Boz Burrell, and Ian Wallace. So some significant lineup changes here. And we're going to see what we think about all these albums. I'm going to be keeping score as always to see how these go. And we're going to start with Chad. So why don't you go from your number four, three, two, and one?
Okay. Number four was easy for me. Um, it's I guess it's the one with the least turnover too. And I just don't think that personally, I don't think Rain Dances is up to snuff with the rest of the catalog earlier. Um, there's a lot of instrumentals on here, which is fine. I don't think it has as much muscle as some of the early ones. Um, I'm not as big on the vocals on this one. I know this era of the band is more sometimes called uh, is it Camavan or Caramel or whatever it is, Caramel, right? Uh,
Caramel.
and I'm not a huge Caravan fan, so bringing over some of that whimsical Canterbury stuff doesn't work as well for me. There's some decent stuff on here, like First Light's cool, Uneven Song, Highways of the Sun. But overall, there's a little yacht rocky feel to a little bit some of it. Some
Totally.
of that's I don't mind sax, but here it's a little lighthearted. I like here. I already see Ken shaking his head. This one doesn't work for me. I know you were there when this album came out and you loved it. I get it. Doesn't work as well for me. It's an okay album. It's not one I reach for. My number three is Danger Money. Now, this was tough. Two and three were really hard for me to separate. Um, I like everything on this album. I don't like it as much as the first album. The first one's just a stone cold classic. Losing Bruford and Holdsworth is a big deal, but I thought that Wetton and Jobson pulled together a really nice collection of songs. It rocks a little more than the UK album. That's not necessarily a good thing for the overall feel of the album. Um, but there's some crazy rhythms on here that I love, like The Only Thing She Needs. Um, it's
Caesar Palace Blues.
yeah, that's another great one. Rendezvous 602 is probably the most known from this. Um, but it's a solid album. I reach for it, you know, somewhat frequently, not quite as much as the first one. Um, my number two then is Drama. I know we lost John Anderson. I know Luis is very upset by that. Uh, but Trevor Horn's voice is okay. It's not going to blow anybody away. That's for sure. And Jeff Downs probably does most of more playing than many other albums I've heard him on. He's, especially if you compare it to Asia. Um, Everything on here I like, except for I can do without White Car. This feels not unnecessary. A minute 21 of, a nice little interlude. Don't need it. Um, One thing I find interesting about this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but does it really happen on the original album, faded out, or I'm sorry, ended and faded back in? Where on this newer CD releases, it fades out and then it comes right back in instead of fading back in. I prefer the fade back in. Um, that said, that's an aside. I like the album a lot. Always loved Tempest Fugit. Machine Messiah doesn't really happen. Just fantastic songs. Chris Squire is just so front and center on here, and Hal is ripping on guitar like he's never
Alan
done.
White's drumming, man. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a solid album. And number one, obviously, is Lark's Tongues and Aspic. It's just the variety on here, the touches of metal, the weirdness, uh, the wacky percussion. There's just so much varied stuff on this. There's something for everybody. It's unlike anything else that was kind of out at the time, and it's really for me a massive step up from Islands. Islands is not a favorite of mine. It's okay. It's not a favorite. But Lark's Tongues 1 and 2 are just fantastic. Book of Saturday is great. It's funny that we've got two albums here that share personnel. Mel Collins is on. Well, no, he was on the previous one. He was on Islands, but then ended up in Camel, and then we've got Wetton that was here and then ended up in UK. But Lark's Tongues, for me, out of these four, it might not be the one that I cruise down the road in. It's not a driving album. There's parts of it that do that, but it is a great album to sit down and be surrounded by. It's a great sounding album, and there's great sounds coming out of it, just all over the map. Fantastic stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of band hopping going on among all these groups, right?
Yeah.
Quite a lot. Quite a lot. All right, King Crimson takes the early lead. Kent, over to you.
So one of these albums is not like the others. And one of these albums is important, and the other three, not so much. So I'll start with my number 4. I'm going to use Prezi, and I'm going to consult my notes and try not to read verbatim from them. So Yes Drama is my number 4. So I'm just going to give a little background with this album. So when tickets went on sale for Yes at Madison Square Garden, they went on sale about 6 months in advance, and they didn't announce the lineup change. So when it came time to see these guys, the Yegels at Madison Square Garden, you could see all the scalpers outside Madison Square Garden putting ketchup on their tickets while they were eating them, because it was a bloodbath outside. And I think I said about like eighth row they were playing in the round. I was not a fan of the album back then. I know it has a very strong cult following. Revisiting it, I find the material's actually quite good. I'm much more receptive to it now than I was when it was released. There's some very strong material here. I think Machine Messiah is, for me, the best track on the album. Wasn't Into the Lens a reworking of a Buggles tune?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and parts of that is actually pretty great. I found the repetition of "I Am a Camera" very annoying. I wanted to excise that. I thought Tempest Fugit was great. I love Squire's bass lines, although the vocoder that kind of wore itself out pretty quickly. The biggest problem I have with the album is that Trevor Horn is simply a pale imitation of John Anderson. He sounds like John Anderson, but like a shitty John Anderson. And it was particularly bad live.
How can it be shittier?
It was. It actually was. And when you saw it live, when he was singing all the classic Yes material, it was kind of bad. And the thing with Jeff Downes is, for my ears, I'm not a not a trained pianist, and his soloing doesn't seem to have the dexterity of a Mraz or Wakeman. He always seemed to have trouble covering those parts. You never, you don't think about a Jeff Downes solo, a keyboard solo, as anything exceptional. Overall, I felt that Steve Howe kind of stole the album, and very strong. So for me, it was like not bad, but I every time I would listen to it, I would think about how much better it would be if Anderson and Wakeman were performing this material. And the other thing is also you realize how strong a musical partnership was between Anderson and Howe when they were composing together and stuff. So
the album wouldn't have been heavy. It wouldn't have been as heavy as it is if Anderson was still there.
probably not. That's probably true. And like I
What,
said,
wasn't a lot of it written as a trio prior to Downes and Horn coming in? I thought that they were working
I think that's
kind of
right.
as a trio initially. So I that's where I get the heaviness from. I'm thinking those three playing together.
I don't know, but again, like I said, I never thought very highly of the album, but having to revisit it, I'm like, yeah, this is okay. It's okay, and I can understand why it has a lot of fans. So my number three and my number two, it was almost virtually a coin toss, and I actually talking to a friend of mine, he convinced me to flip them this afternoon. So, like around 4 o'clock, I flipped my number three and my number two. So for number three, I'm going with this UK Danger Money. So this one is a huge drop off from the first album. I'm sorry, Anthony. Holdsworth is missed very badly. At this point, it was 1979, right? The keyboards, bass, drum trio had been done to death, and much better, I think, by ELP. And, dare I say it, even for a period of time, even like Triumvirate. For the most part, I find the music is excellent. The playing is first rate, no issues with anybody. I mean, Eddie's playing is phenomenal. Bosio is Bosio. I mean, John's a great bass player, and he's a great singer. He's one of the great, rock vocalists. But I think part of the problem I have is that for the most part, the lyrics are horrible. They're approaching Love Beach horrible. I mean, they're kind of embarrassing. And then you get like a track, music's great, and then you hit Nothing to Lose. And that was basically like Wetton's tryout for Asia. And
there's truth to that. There's vocal melodies in there too that start to lean towards what Asia was.
Yeah. So basically, overall, I found that the album kind of demonstrates how good a keyboardist Jobson is. But I just keep thinking how much better the album would have been with a guitarist. So, and having seen them live, and if you listen to Night After Night, you could hear how it wasn't when they were doing like the quartet material as a trio. It just wasn't as good. So again, it's a fine album. It's a very fine album, but it's not an album I would reach to, at least in comparison to the first album, which to me is one of the all-time greats. So my next one, my number two. Sorry, Chad, you got this completely wrong. Camel, Rain Dances. So this was a drop off from Moon Madness only because Moon Madness was phenomenal. So nothing, it was very hard for them to match that. I love Richard Sinclair. I think he was a great addition, and his presence is felt throughout the album. I always liked his vocals. I don't find that they're so whimsical on this album. Maybe so on Breathless, but not on this album. The tunes tend to be a little bit shorter, but you got like those first two opening tracks. You got First Light and Metronome. Those are killers. Latimer's solo, he totally goes off on Metronome. Tell Me has some really nice flute. I don't know if that's Mel or if that's Andy that's playing the flute, but overall that tune kind of sounds like an outtake from Moon Madness to me. Highways of the Sun is definitely a more commercial tune, but even still, Pete Barton throws down a very nice solo on there. one of these days I'll get an early night. It's got some really nice blowing on it from Mel Collins. And then Latimer solos over Sinclair's playing this really cool funky bass line. Overall, I think there's some great instrumentals and typical great solos from Latimer and Barden's. And the one thing about Camel nobody ever talks about is Pete Barden's. To me, he's the unsung hero of Camel.
Yep.
He was Andy Latimer's partner. I don't know who formed the band, but I have to believe that there was a partnership there, and he was the perfect foil for Latimer. And when he left, there was overall a fall off in quality. Andy took control of the band, and he moved the music in a more commercial direction. Great records, I like Nude and stuff. I'm not so crazy about once Andy moved out to California and stuff. Dust and Dreams and stuff like that didn't really do much for me. But really, I always thought of Camel as, it's funny enough, I always think of him as Pete Barden's band. I mean, he was certainly the most famous guy in the band, and having played with Van Morrison. So anyway, I'm big on Rain Dances. Could have been number 3, but I made it number 2. So my number 1, which if it's not unanimous, I'm going to be shocked, is Lark's Tongue. To me, that represented a seismic shift in the progressive rock cosmos. I think it's one of the most important albums ever recorded in the history of progressive rock and maybe rock. There was nothing before it was ever like it. Not even from King Crimson. The closest comparison I would make to that lineup was Mahavishnu Orchestra. And I would have to believe that there was some influence on Fripp by Mahavishnu. You had these virtuoso musicians that completely threw away the rule book. The album's filled with all kinds of contrasts between pizzicato and fortissimo. You get these shadings of light and dark. You got Jamie Muir sprinkling all this weird percussive elements over this volcanic rhythm section. It's all about precision. You got Fripp's guitar just cutting through like a laser beam through everything. I mean, it's like proto metal in a sense. David Cross is kind of a wild card. I mean, he was clearly the weakest link in the band. He wasn't a great violinist. He was all right. And he handles the mellotron fine. It's like this slash and burn album. It's totally uncompromising, but somehow it's cohesive and it's also beautiful at the same time. I think it's a very, very important album, and I can't understate it enough. And not necessarily my favorite King Crimson album, but where it is in the sequence, in the history of prog rock, it's an extraordinary record. You can't name an album that came before it that was anything at all like that record. It was
hard to believe that was 73.
It was completely unique, and of course it set the pattern for what's to come. So those are my 4. I'm sorry if I pontificated a little too long.
Really interesting.
You're not sorry.
An album that's so good like that, yet could even possibly not be a favorite King Crimson album. It just goes to show you the strength of their catalog, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, very just. I find it to be for when it occurred and for what it is. I think it's a very important record.
Yeah, I would agree. Eric, what's your take on these 4?
All right. Well, Ken, prepare to be shocked. Number 4.
Whoa. Wow.
Oh, you got him while he was drinking. Careful.
I did. And I agree. It's not my favorite King Crimson record. I prefer Red. That's probably my favorite. But here's what I'll say. I love Lark's Tongues and Aspic Part 2. Easy Money is terrific. I feel like a lot of this record, you have to wait a long time for the payoff. There's a lot of parts. Book of Saturday, to me, I love John Wetton's voice too. Let me say that because, again, I know I get bagged on for vocals. I love John Wetton. Honestly, I like Book of Saturday does nothing for me. Talking Drum, it takes a long time to get to where they get ripping, and it's just kind of the same thing over and over again. So I really don't know if it's I don't get this album.
You don't understand it,
You
Eric.
don't get
I
it
don't.
because,
You're right. I don't understand it.
because Eric, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like the way that album opens up, it just hits you. It just sucks
It
you in,
doesn't.
and it just hits you with a sledgehammer.
It
It
doesn't.
doesn't hit
It
him.
does not. It Lark's Tongue Part 1 takes forever to have something happen.
But the
Like
tension they
you
build,
get these
man,
little tiny
the
sections
tension's
of
so
Fred.
great.
Well, yeah, but I got to listen to 7 minutes of tapping around on timpani and stuff to get to
Oh,
hearing Fripp for
I
a
have to
minute.
go lie down after this.
I would like to point out, Eric,
Then I
that
did my job.
you're
Did
pulling
my job.
you're pulling a George Lamy with this.
I was just
Yeah,
going to say
it's-
this is like George and For the Crimson King. all
And
over
this is
again.
not
George
scripted.
is like, what's going
Off the
on?
cuff.
I
Off
can't
the
look
road.
at it from an importance standpoint. I have to look at it from what would I pull off the shelf, and this would be number 4 without question.
Fair enough. Yep, fair enough.
That's all I can say. You obviously you disagree with me, but that's kind of how it goes. Now, the other 3 they were a little more difficult. I like them all. I mean, I'm fine. We'll skip the King Crimson. So my number 3 is Rain Dances. I really like a lot of the songs. Like Ken, and I'll agree with you on this one, Ken. First Light and Metronome, 2 great openers. Tell me I have to disagree with you. That one kind of puts me to sleep. That and Elkie, I think, and then the title track are kind of, but I get where you mix those in. It kind of breaks things up a little bit. Highways of the Sun, just like Ken said, it's very poppy, but it's a good tune. Skylines is a great one. So, and I'm a big Camel fan. And another thing I think coming from this, I didn't know any of these bands when they came out. So as you go through and you listen to these, like King Crimson's had so many lineup changes. For some reason, that doesn't impact me. I like 80s Crimson. I like 70s Crimson. It's hard to kind of think of it when you're not there. I understand, I'll make a stupid analogy because I can't think of anything else. Like, I was a big Van Halen fan when David Lee Roth left. I'm like, ugh, I don't know how that impacts somebody now who gets into Van Halen 20 years after they've been done. The King Crimson lineups, I either like the records or I don't. I don't necessarily know that I'm thinking about the lineups all that much. And with Camel, I don't mind Sinclair. I kind of like when they're singing together. It sounds good. They kind of have that monotone. There's not a ton of variation in the voices, but it works for me. My number 2 is UK. I love this record, and I shouldn't because Holdsworth isn't on it, but I think they're great songs. I love Nothing to Lose, Danger Money, Caesar Palace Blues. I think Chad said there's not a weak song on here. And Ken, you saw them live, but I didn't. So I can't think in terms of what they lost. I like the first record probably a little more because of Holdsworth, but I think these are great tunes. Again, Wettin is phenomenal. I love his singing.
Listen to Night After Night. You'll hear it.
No, I have it, but I get that there is a big drop off when you don't have the guitar in there on those tracks. But
And what's even worse is listen to the Sahara of Snow, which UK used to do, but then got recorded with the Bruford Band, right? That was a UK tune, and it's a mind fuck on Feels Good to Me. So anyway,
I'm sure.
I'm interrupting.
Yeah,
I'm agitated. I'm interrupting. I'm sorry.
Listen to the
No,
Penn's
you're
Landing
fine.
show
It's
with the first lineup.
What's that, Chad? I didn't hear you.
Listen to the Penn's Landing show from Philadelphia. It was like one of the last shows of the original group. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I get, but I guess I'm looking at I'm listening to the studio album. I never saw these guys live. I have Night After Night. I should probably pull that one out, but I think they're great songs on this. I like every song on that record. Fantastic. I'd love to have heard Holdsworth play in this. Even if Bruford's gone, keep Bosio and have Holdsworth in there. I'm sure it would have been phenomenal. And I'm part of that cult, Ken. I absolutely love Drama. I love it. Again, I didn't see them live. I've heard Trevor Horn was not the best on the old stuff, and I get that, but Machine Messiah is probably a top 5 for me for a Yes tune, easily. Tempest Fugit. We've talked about all the songs. White Car, I get, but White Car kind of gives you that little, okay, take a breath, and then we're coming into Does It Really Happen? Even Run Through the Light or whatever it's so, but it works for me. I think Squire and Howe are absolutely phenomenal on this record. I absolutely like. It's probably some of my favorite Steve Howe stuff. So I am part of the drama cult, and that is my number one.
Eric, your picks were the exact opposite of mine.
I was going to say
I did my
same
job
exact
then.
thing. I was going to say the same exact thing.
Completely wiped me out.
Or you wipe me out.
We offset each other completely.
Gotta have balance.
Yeah, we gotta have some variety here. That's all right.
Mhm.
That's all
I
right.
am the yin, you are the yang.
I'm loving this.
I can only wait to hear what George has to say, and he's up right now.
My number 4 is King Crimson. I don't like that song. Other than part 2 of the title track, of course, everybody likes that. It's a great tune, but the rest of this, I don't like any of it. It's meandering, except the parts that are avant. I don't like either one of those things, and it's in abundance here. And like Eric said, I don't care about how important it is. That's got nothing to do with me. I don't like it. And that's pretty much it. Camel would be my number 3. Like others have said, I like First Light and Metronome. I also like Uneven Song and Skylines. Those are good tunes. But like Chad said, the Caravan flavor doesn't work for me. I don't need any of that. And some of this more of the time kind of stuff, commercially stuff, I don't think works for them. This would not be to me, the first 5, and then you have this, it's you're falling off a cliff practically for me. It's not comparable. My surprise is number 2 is a UK. I actually never heard this before because I, of course, got pushed into the first album by every fusion guy I knew and really liked it. I always thought that for the names involved, it was a little underwhelming. So I'm like, why would I try a lesser version of it? So trying it for this, it was like I was pleasantly surprised. I like these guys have said, I think there's not a bad song on it. The only thing she needs, that's a bit of a banger there. The title track is cool. For me, the drummer change is a plus. I like Bruford, of course. I love Bruford, but Bazio is just more interesting to me. Better sound and more of a Phil's guy instead of a
Bills versus Fields.
Yeah, like weird rhythms guy. I'm more interested in the way he plays. But yeah, I had to do a mea culpa and message Anthony and say, you know what, this album's actually good. I didn't want to do, but it is good. But yeah, my number 1 is Drama. Finally a Yes album with some bite to the guitar sound, right? I mean, Steve Howe's guitar sound through the years is like a big bugaboo for me, especially on Relayer. It just annoys me. This album's so good and the guitar sound is so lame.
Yes.
But Machine Messiah is a top 10 Yes song for me. I love Tempest Fugit. I really like Does It Really Happen? Again, there's no bad songs on this, really. A little shorty song I could do without, but I think this has got underrated, overrated syndrome. It was underrated for so long that all these snapbackers have made it a little overrated now. People are acting like, this is the greatest fucking Yes album. It's not that, but it is good. I like it. The member change, neither one of them is a plus, obviously, but I think they cover it pretty well. I mean, they're not asking Downs to do too much. And yeah, the vocals are definitely weaker. But again, he's not going for any big notes or anything. The melodies are very basic, so not that big a deal. So I made it my number 1.
Snapbackers. I love that.
George, those were excellent picks, by the way.
I knew you'd like those.
All right. George, I like the fact how you kind of brought in the whole, new players and how much of an impact they made. Because, yeah, you could argue that Downs and Horn didn't really make much of an impact. But I think if you were to, maybe I'll just throw this question out to everybody. You compare this to Tormato. Which do you prefer?
Not even close. Drama.
This is a better album than Tormato.
Yep.
Yep.
Tormato even tomatoed itself.
Really the good song on there was on the Silent Wings of Freedom.
That's a great track. Yeah, that's a great track.
But that was, the standard.
Yeah, but one track does not an album make.
No. It was, there was
A
some really
shit
good.
album with a couple of good things. That's it.
I am one of the few who could say he actually saw them do Arriving UFO
Oh,
live.
lucky you.
Oh,
I
yeah,
was
what a rare fucking treat. Were
I
you all
drove
getting
up to
kicked in the
Springfield,
balls?
Massachusetts to see them do that.
Did they
All
play
right.
Circus of Heaven, that gem?
Yeah, they play that like every night.
Yeah.
It was terrible.
John looked out in the audience and says, Ken, the song is for you.
Would you like some candy floss?
I
Ah.
I remember it well. We ate at the Red Rose Pizzeria in Springfield, Massachusetts, and they came to us and said, "Here is your veal and cheese sandwich." So,
All righty then.
Yikes.
All right, we have a tie. King Crimson, yes. Lewis, over to you.
Okay, here we go. My number 4, I think. So the way that I took this assignment was, you know, who did it best after the lineup changed? Not necessarily what record I like best, right? So where do I find that there's a bigger change, and where do I find that I miss things where that used to be there before? So from that perspective, my number 4 has got to be UK. And the reason is that I do think that the songwriting is not as good at all. The lyrics are embarrassing. Um, it's too fucking happy for me. Just gonna say that out there. I have no use for that shit. And there's one
Rendezvous
very bad thing,
62? That's not happy.
dude. It's one thing to pretend that it's something, but if the fucking backbeat is like this, it's not working. And the other thing is, I really discovered after, because I hadn't heard that record in years. That already tells you something, right? I never really felt the need to go back to it. And I realize now that I really don't care for Eddie Jobson's fucking keyboard patches at all. I think they sound sterile. I just don't like them. The dude can play. Nobody can touch his musicianship. I just don't like his fucking sound palette at all. Another example that comes to mind like that is Jordan Rudess. Dude's a fucking freak of nature. But would it kill you to not use presets? I don't know. Just saying.
He should borrow Derek's presets.
He should. No, he should let Derek program the stuff in.
There you go.
But in any case, I digress. I don't like that record very much, even though I fucking love Bozio, and I totally hear what George was saying. I think that Bozio, I mean, the dude just has a different level of power and a different approach to the drums, and that elevates it. That gives it a lot more energy. But I think that the tunes, they just don't really work for me, and I don't really hear it as UK. It doesn't sound exactly like the same band to me. It's a little different. So I don't. So from that perspective, that's got to be number 4. I know people love their UK. I know Anthony gets wet ankles at the mere mention of Jobson. It's all good. However, this is not me. My number 3. I'm gonna go with Rain Dances. I think that the record starts great, but it very quickly loses steam. And yeah, Camel, I mean, after Moon Madness, you do feel it. There's a big change. And it is a little too whimsical for my taste. It is a little bit too trying to be too many things at once, trying to be commercial, trying to be this and that. And it's still Camel, though. It doesn't sound, the drop off for me is not as big as with a UK record, but it is not really a Camel record that I listen to very often, even though I do like Caravan.
Luis, what do you think about Richard Sinclair's bass playing on the album? You're a bassist.
I think Richard Sinclair is a great bass player. I think he does a good job.
Don't you think he's more interesting?
Well, what he does is he does change the dynamic with the drums. And it brings a little mellow aspect to it. And not that Camel was ever hard hitting, but it does mellow it out a little bit because he has a different approach to where he chooses his notes and where he lays the heavy notes. So I think he's great. I think that musically, it's a pleasure to hear it, but it's not. It doesn't have the old punch of Camel that I like better. Even though Camel is not really ever a punchy band, it just lacks a little bit of that. Although Barton's is still there, and I also agree with you completely. I think he is the secret sauce of that band, that nobody talks about. And for sure, once he was gone, Camel was no longer the same band at all. So this one is less of a drop off. I like the record, but I very rarely reach for it, and I never listened to the whole thing. That's another thing. So, okay, now my number two has got to be Drama. And the reason is that fucking album just rips ass. It's a great record. And yeah, I share George's frustration. To me, it's always sounded like fucking Steve Howe grabbed his guitar, threw it in the driveway, put his car over it a few times, then brought it back into the studio and just plugged it in, and that's how he played. It is a horrible fucking tone. And somehow, thanks to Trevor Horn, who also produced this record, that is not a problem here. So can we at least pause to say the production is fucking better than all those classic Yes albums where the guitar sounds like shit? Can I have an amen that the guitar doesn't sound like shit? And that's a very, very big thing.
Isn't he using like strats and stuff on that album?
Yeah, he has a different thing. He's not just playing those big fat, Gibsons with little tinny pickups, and it sounds good. And Machine Messiah is an uncharacteristic sound for them. They never went back to that sound. But it fucking kicks ass. It makes you wonder, why not do more of that? Because it's so fucking good. I don't understand. Why would you walk away from your best work and instead sing about fucking UFOs and fairies and all that shit? I don't get it.
Well, there's so much politics in Yes that had to be part of it.
I'm sure, but I'm just saying, as a fan, somebody who came into them mainly as a metalhead, I really like that record. And it's not heavy, but it has a spine, and it has a very clear intent. And the songs are memorable. To this day, I still throw it in. I like it. It's a great record. Also, and this is my bias, I love the absence of John Anderson. And I do understand that John Anderson has many, many fans and acolytes and sycophants and bust out your fucking thesaurus. I don't give a shit. The reality is that guy doesn't do it for me. And I can imagine that Trevor Horn struggled with the old material, but I'm not judging the live show. I'm judging the album. And I think that the only real drop-off in that record is Jeff Downes.
Yeah, but he plays well on that record. I mean,
yes,
but piano runs in Machine Messiah.
Given his limitations, he plays within his limitations.
But the thing about it, that's exactly right. When you think of Yes, you think of very kinetic keyboards.
But what would you change what he did on that record? I think he does exactly what the record calls for.
No,
well,
I think you got it back.
There could have been a little bit better. Look, we used to have this discussion on progressive ears all the time. I know this is very politically incorrect, but it was the 90s. I used to refer to him as Jeff Downes syndrome. And I didn't know that the guy was in the chat, and then me and him got into it. And I said, sorry, dude, but you can't fucking play the old songs. I don't give a shit what you say. You can't do it. You're 1.5 beats late every single fucking time.
Could you imagine him playing Sound Chaser?
Oh.
No, there is no way. And I know they went out and they did it, and I can only cringe at what that might have sounded like. And again, I say it with no ill will towards Steve Howe or anyone. People got to pay their bills. I'm just saying, not anybody can play those fucking tunes. And Jeff Downes can certainly play the drama material, but I don't think the only thing I miss from drama would have been some more explosive keyboards. Now, granted, the bass is all over the place. The drums are phenomenal. Chuck was saying, Alan White really plays well on that record. And he is the secret sauce of that one. As much as Squire and Howe are up there, Alan White is fucking doing the thing, So I love that record. I make no apologies for it. It's one of the few Yes records that I really can just say that about. So I love it.
You have to wonder, we talk so much about how much we love all that Steve Howe does on this album, and his tone and all the great solos and everything. You have to wonder if that lack of Rick Wakeman's presence allowed him to do that.
It's possible because you're always fighting for bandwidth and space, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But also the producer could have carved out gap. Okay, you go here, you go there. You don't have to fill, isn't that a fucking drum circle? You don't have to fill every accent, right? So I don't know. I think it's very well produced. I think Trevor Horn deserves a lot of credit for that. It's a great production. Sounds great, flows great. I love that record. And my number one, of course, has to be King Crimson, for the simple reason that they invented a new fucking musical idiom. I don't give a shit if it doesn't kick fast or whatever. Everything about that record is new and fresh. And what happened is you had Islands, which was a good record, but then you get this, and there's no drop off. It's miles ahead in every way that matters to me. Everybody's playing great on it. Everybody is trying and accomplishing new things. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that the first time I heard that record, I loved it. That's not true. That's not true at all. But I will say that after I gave it some time, my perception of it changed. And I think for the better, because that is a record that requires actually repeated listens. It requires stuff that maybe people don't feel like they want to do, and that's perfectly fine. But I think it's impossible to judge it on a first impression, because it's just too fucking statistically dense. And it may seem like they're wanking, but they're really not. I mean, there's a lot of wanking in Providence in Red. This is different. There is a very carefully structured method to the madness. And I'm all for it. As a musician, as a fan, it's a life-changing record for me completely. Once it took foothold in my mind, once I actually got it, because it also shows you what is possible. It allows you to dare to think different. That's what I love about it. The songs are amazing, and I think the flow is great. Again, that was not my first impression, but now I hear it and I think, holy shit! And every time I hear it, I just like it more. So I'm not even burnt out on it. I play it every year, once or twice, and I need to sit down and fucking hear it. It's not background. So for me, it's an important record. I think Ken undersold it. It is without a doubt one of the
When
top.
does Ken undersell things?
Well, in this case, I think he fell short. He could have said even more nice things about it, and still it wouldn't have been enough, because it's a fucking masterpiece as far as I'm concerned. I completely agree with him. I think I don't even know that they knew what the fuck that what they were doing was going to be that important.
Robert knew.
But it's amazing to me what he was able. I mean, somebody had to have the vision. And that was probably Fripp.
Yeah, of course.
But it's uncanny to me that record could be as good as it is. And all these years later, 50 years later or 51, whatever it is, it's still fresh. It's still good. And all the people involved are still making a buck off it, right? David Cross is playing Larks live right now. And people go. So it's powerful stuff. I don't know anybody, and I mean, I do talk to a lot of musicians. I don't know anybody who's a muso, like in that kind of environment, who doesn't sit there and study that record. It's kind of like some of the Miles records. There are certain records that even if you're not a jazz guy, you just learn from them. It's an education.
That's why I said I think that Mahavishnu weighed heavily.
Yes, I had never made that connection, but I don't think that's far-fetched. I I just think that this record is fucking lightning in a bottle. It's what it is for me. Right. So that was an easy number one.
All right.
Luis, thank you for coming up with a new meaning to Rip's ass.
Yes.
All right, King Crimson takes the early, well, not early lead. We're late in the episode already. We only have 3 to go here. So, Chuck, what say you on these 4?
All right. My number 4, Rain Dances. What's that? Moon Madness is my favorite Camel album. I love Caravan, love Richard Sinclair, love Mel Collins. But what's it to me? And so after the first 3 songs and just including an uneven song on the album, so I just always felt that Rain Dances was kind of a album to me. Sometimes found it a bit boring. Don't listen to it much. But but don't get me wrong, it's still a strong album. It's just that despite having a great bassist like Richard Sinclair, the band just seemed a little bit too mellowish on this album. That's my number 4. My number 3 is Drama. What's that? And don't get me wrong, what's that? 3, 2, and 1. I really love these albums, but I always felt that what's that? I always felt that this album was a step ahead. Which I always like Trevor Horn's vocals on the studio album. Remember, I'm also coming from the perspective that Lewis was just mentioning. Never got to see this version live, so I can't really although I did hear about Trevor Horn struggling to sing some of John Anderson's songs back then. But I always felt that Drama was quite strong. What's that? But yet, in comparison to the other 2, what's that? I always felt that what's it? Forgive me. What's in comparison to the album that came before it and the album that came after it. And so I always felt that this was a strong album. So that's my number 3 in Drama. My number 2 is Danger Money. I'm from the school of Anthony Ferraro, that I've loved every song on this album. Oddly, as much as I love Alan Holdsworth, I always felt that I always connected more so with Danger Money. And I always found it odd that, when I asked a few of my buddies who were very much into UK, that Steve Vai was actually supposed to be the replacement for Alan Holdsworth. But yet Alan Holdsworth and Bill Bruford wanted Steve Hackett. So you can just imagine either those 2 playing on Danger Money. I have a hard time seeing that. So, but yet, I always loved Danger Money. I always loved the title track, Rendezvous 602. The things she need, and Caesar's Palace Blues. It's one of my favorite songs off the album. I think it ends off the album very well. Forgive me. And then Carry No Cross. Although I do like the Alan Holdsworth and Bill Bruford version of Carry No Cross. But I still think that this album, despite the Bruford and Holdsworth not being on it, it's still a strong album, one of my favorites. Now, my number 1, obviously, I've spoken about it quite a bit here, is always Lark's Tongue and Aspect. On most days, this might be my favorite progressive rock album of all time. Unlike many other of my favorite albums that I've listened to over the years and so, I automatically connected to this album. From the instant that I heard it, from the drop of Needle and Soul to the ending of Lark's Tongue Part 2, I always felt that this was a strong album. And I've never felt that King Crimson ever got better than this. And it took me a long time to get it to Red. I always loved Starless and Bible Black. But yet I always felt that this to me and so was, just as Ken mentioned and so, perhaps one of the most important progressive rock albums of this generation. And I thought that this album cohesively just brought all these 5 musicians together, and they just killed it on here. So my number 1 is Lark's Tongue and Aspect, King Crimson.
All right. Anthony's picks. Coming in at number 4 is Camel. Coming in at number 3 is King Crimson.
Wow.
Number 2 is Yes.
Of course.
And is anybody surprised? Number 1.
Of course.
Oh,
Eddie Jobson.
There we go. Fucking it.
I also heard that Martin Barr was approached for
Yes.
replacing Holdsworth as well
Mm-hmm.
in UK, which that would
Mm-hmm.
have been a weird fit too, I think. But
Yep.
all right. So obviously we have a King Crimson winner, but I'll give you my picks anyway. So I'm going to go number 4. I'm going to go with Camel. I will say I like all of these albums.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the Camel album is a tad laid back. I think it's almost like they really wanted Mel Collins to shine on this album. He does some really nice sax work on this album, but I think that kind of lends the album. It's kind of got this like kind of smooth jazz thing permeating some of the songs. I think the instrumentals are really nice. There's nothing bad on this album. The vocal pieces are okay. They should have just made a whole instrumental album, but there's some really nice stuff on here. I think that Latimer is a little toned down on this album,
Mm-hmm.
but I would agree that I think that Barden's him and this is like him and Mel's album in my opinion. Latimer's got some nice solos, but for the most part, I think it's mostly an album that shines due to the sax and the keyboards. But it's a good album. Richard Sinclair fits right in. I think it's a good album. It's just kind of like Camel Light, but the Camel Light is also really good, so I can't knock it whatsoever. Number 3, I'm gonna go with Danger Money. And yeah, I like this album a lot, but I really miss Holdsworth on here. I really miss the guitar. I think, Eddie is doing a great job. He's a tremendous player. His violin stuff is great. I love he's hitting some like Emerson style organ solos and synth solos on here. There's some great tracks on here. Title track is awesome. Love Rendezvous 602, Caesar's Palace Blues, Carrying No Cross the Big Ep is really good too. Maybe it meanders just a little bit, but and Nothing to Lose I think is a great rocker. But yeah, it totally foreshadows what Wetton was going to do in Asia. I think it's a really good album. I don't think it quite hits the lofty status of the debut though. For me, I never thought so. I know a lot of people who like this album way more. I don't know, not necessarily me. Drama is a really good album. That's my number 2. I've always liked it since it first came out. Ken was talking about the Madison Square Garden show. I was at the time, I was just like, what, 14 years old at the time. And my dad was going to take me to go see the show at the Garden, and we wound up not going or not getting tickets for whatever reason. And I remember the next day, the scathing review in the Daily News newspaper. It was a full-page review of the show, which I saved for many, many years. I don't have it anymore, I don't think. But all they talked about was how the crowd was just not into this new singer, this short little guy trying to do John Anderson's vocals and whatnot. But I think it's a great album. I think I agree with what everybody has said so far. I think Howe's tone is just great on this. It's like we've forever waited for him to have this tone, and he's never had it again since. I don't know what the deal is. I mean, you go see him live. I mean, I love him. He's a great player. He's one of the greats. But man, his tone just sucks all the time, live or on record, but not on this album. I think it's amazing on this album, and I think Chris Squire is the other MVP on this record. And the songs are great. Tempest Fugue is great. Machine Messiah is great. They're all really good. White Car is short and it's probably the least appealing song on here, but even that's kind of clever and cool. So I don't mind it too much. I think it's a great album. I love how, when I was a kid, you get the LP and they tell you every single guitar that Steve played on all the songs. Like, he played a Telecaster there. He played a Les Paul there. He played a Broadcaster there and all this. It's this very, very cool. For a young music nerd, that was always good to see. And number 1 for me, obviously, is King Crimson. I absolutely love this album. This is my favorite King Crimson album. It's one of my favorite prog rock albums of all time. And I can listen to it over and over again, and I hear something new every single time. I think the bookend Lark's pieces are incredible. It's just so savage. I agree with Ken 1,000%. I don't know how they could not have taken some sort of an influence from what Mahavishnu was doing, because it sounds like somewhat of an extension of that, just done in a different way. The guitar tones are just jagged and ragged, and the mellotron is everywhere, and Wetton sounds great. I mean, the rhythm section is just absolutely cooking on this album. And I don't mind the minutes of and passages of kind of like not much happening. I think they're building tension throughout this whole album. I think, like the talking drum is just like it's just something is going to happen. It's just like eerie. It's very, very cool.
That violin in the middle of part one. Talk
Uh,
about eerie and tension.
Well,
yeah,
that's why I was talking about contrasts. You know, there's all these and it creates a very dynamic element to the album. And,
yeah. Exiles is so good. So,
Yep.
so good.
Even better live.
Yeah, oh for sure. I love it. I love this period in King Crimson.
I know surround music isn't Ken's thing, but Lark's Tongues in 5-1 is insane.
Yeah.
I would imagine it would be distracting, but it has enough texture that maybe I wouldn't be too pissed that it doesn't sound like it's a band, you know? Yeah.
So we have for as far as first place goes, we've got King Crimson wins with 5. Yes has 2, although Yes had 3 second place votes. King Crimson had 0. So if we want to do some kind of a weighted score, this is pretty much all neck and neck there, right? UK had 1 first place finish, Camel none. So yeah, I think it's safe to say amongst everybody here today, Lark's Tongues and Aspic and Drama are really the 2 winners out of these albums, right? So yeah, that was fun. All 4 good albums, though, you know. So, always good to revisit these.
So can I throw something out there?
Sure.
What if it wasn't Lark's Tongue? What if it was?
Well, yeah, I mean, because what could we,
what if it was Lizard or something like that? You know.
Well, really, it could have been Wake Up Poseidon. It could have been Lizard. It could have been Island. It could have been Discipline, right? Could have been any of those.
Technically, it could have been Red. There's a transition there too, right?
True. Yeah. Slight.
Not a big one, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think we might have changed things.
I think for me, if it was Lizard or Island, and I like both of those, I think Yes would have won this pretty easily.
Same.
And if it was Discipline, I still would have picked King Crimson. If it was Wake Up Poseidon, I still would have picked King Crimson. I think for me, anyway.
I may have picked Yes over that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I would have gone with Yes over Poseidon, but otherwise it's Crimson because again, what did they do in fucking Discipline? They reinvented themselves completely in a way that worked.
Progressive rock with Discipline.
Yes. So it's that's the thing with King Crimson is you just have to fucking respect that level of creativity. Nobody else has it. Nobody else is gonna have it ever.
Yeah.
It's too fucking crazy. But they pulled it off repeatedly.
Yep.
Which
and
is
then with
also
a double
incredible.
trio.
The same band doing it twice is nuts.
I know.
Yeah. And you know, Adrian Belew is like another fucking freak of nature.
Yep.
Where you put that guy's guitars and his fucked up sounds and his Looney Tunes brain with Fripp. Wow.
Are we excited about Beat? About seeing Beat?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm interested.
I'm not going to be able to see it. I leave on Monday. I'm going to miss it.
The tour's
in Mexico.
It's not going to be till what, September?
Yeah, it's in the fall.
I don't know.
Oh, it's in the fall? I thought it was in the summer.
I think it starts like
maybe I'll catch it.
Lewis, are you not around in 2 weeks?
I'll be in Mexico and I can do it, but I can't. I'm not going to be here in Chicago.
Okay. Well, you're going to want to be involved in the next episode.
I will certainly be involved.
All right,
friend.
Because the next episode we're going back to for 1 week. We're going back to an album study, and we're going to tackle a very, very controversial album. Tales from Topographic Ocean.
Oh.
You can thank you can thank the guy up in the corner for that one.
All right. Well, I think
it's a love-hate album for everybody.
That I'll be wearing my flame retardant underwear, and I will take all comers because
it's the elephant in the corner of the room.
Yes, that's right.
It's about time.
You might want to have to put something over your head again.
Yes, this will be a very
no. I will just. It's gonna be really hot in Mexico. I'll be wearing a tank top and I'll just be laying it in.
There you go. All right. So everybody watching and everybody here in the panel, go and revisit yourself with Tales from Topographic Ocean by Yes.
Deep breath.
Is an album we have never really dove into much here on this program. We're going to do it in 2 weeks. So till then, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube all together.
All the
Damn
damn time.
Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Also down below, we got the links to our Ko-Fi page for channel donations, our merch page, and our Cameo page. Thank you in advance for all your support there. We'll see you soon here in 2 weeks on In the Prog Seat for Chuck Alvarez, George LeMay, Lewis Nasser, Eric Porter, Ken Golden, and Chad Hutchinson, and Anthony Ferraro, and Chris Canzaneri. I'm Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you in 2 weeks for some yes. Bye-bye.